Hello everyone, myself Sreelakshmi, Assistant Professor, Department of EEE, Vedavyasa Institute of Technology. Today I am going to present a tech talk on floating windmills. The content included are introduction, need for floating windmills, energy production, types of floating windmills, advantages, disadvantages, and conclusion. As we all know, energy is a major factor in today's society. Alternative fuel and alternative energy resources are in great demand. Almost everyone in the world is looking for more energy efficient ways to live. Hybrid vehicles and other fuel efficient technology is arising around the world. Now we have no choice but to develop new technology in very little time. A floating wind turbine is a wind turbine mounted on a floating structure that allows the turbine to generate electricity in water depths where bottom mounted towers are not feasible. The wind can be stronger and steadier over water due to the absence of topographic features that may disrupt wind flow. The electricity generated is sent to shore through undersea cables. The initial capital cost of floating turbines is competitive with bottom-mounted near-shore wind turbines, while the rate of energy generation is higher out in the sea as the wind flow is often more steady and unobstructed by terrain features. Why are floating wind farms made? The wind speed and frequency is higher and more stable at sea than on land, as there are no obstacles to limit its path. In addition, being located far from coast minimizes the visual impact. The installation vessels required for fixed foundation, such as jack-up or dynamic positioning vessels, can be avoided. The installation of floating platforms, on the other hand, mainly requires relatively frequent and cheaper tugboats and cable-laying vessels. How energy is produced from windmills? The wind blows on blades and make them turn. The blades turns the shaft inside the box at the top of the turbine. The shaft goes into a gearbox which increases the rotation speed. The generator uses magnetic field to convert the rotational energy into electrical energy. These are similar to those found in normal power stations. The power output goes to a transformer which converts the electricity coming out from the generator at around 700 volts to the right voltage for distribution system, typically 33,000 volt. The national grid transmits the power around the country. Instruments to measure the wind speed and direction are fitted on top of the nacelle. When the wind changes direction, motor turns the nacelle and the blades along with it around to face the wind. The nacelle is also fitted with brakes so that the turbine can be switched off in very high winds like during storms. This prevents the turbine being damaged. All this information is recorded by computers and transmitted to a control center, which means that people don't have to visit the turbine very often, just occasionally for a mechanical check. Now, let's see some types of floating platforms for wind turbines. Floating offshore wind energy is based on floating platforms for wind turbines. The choice of one type or another will depend on sea and seabed conditions, the wind in the area, the size of the wind turbine, the depth of the harbors, the manufacturing facilities, or the availability and price of materials and equipment. First one, barge. The concept is similar to that of a ship in terms of dimensions. In other words, the beam and length are significantly larger than the draught. The floating platform has a large surface area in contact with the water, which is precisely what gives it stability. Like boats, they are made to move to avoid overstressing and stresses on the structure. To minimize these movements, The platform is usually fitted with heave plates which are surfaces below the water line. Second type of floating windmill is semi-submergible. This design seeks to minimize the surface area exposed to the water, but always maximizing the volume, which is what really displaces the mass of water and provides buoyancy. Geometrically, the ideal would be a sphere, but a sphere is not practical to manufacture. So the volumes that provide buoyancy are divided into several vertical cylinders which are joined by beams and braces to create a surface where the turbine can be installed. Their size and the distance between them determine their stability. Third type of floating windmill turbine is spar. In this model, most of the weight is placed at the lowest possible point to provide stability. For example, if we throw a hollow watertight cylinder into the vessel, it will float if the ratio of the height to the surface of the base is sufficient for the volume of water displaced to compensate for its weight. If the cylinder is homogeneous, it will not be stable floating vertically and it will tip over to float horizontally. To avoid this, the cylinder is provided with a lot of mass at the end opposite to where the turbine is installed to maintain verticality. In short, buoyancy is provided by the geometry of the cylinder, while stability is provided by the weight at the lowest point. As turbines become larger and larger, it requires very long cylinders to compensate for the weights, which makes this solution very difficult to manufacture, transport and install. Last type of floating windmill turbine is tensioned legs platform. The newest and currently most technically risky concept. The platform does not actually float as such once the turbine is installed on it. The main aim is to reduce the dimensions in order to lower the manufacturing cost. Prior to installation, to prevent the assembly from turning over as the center of gravity of the assembly rises, temporarily reusable floats are attached to the TLP platform, which in turn allows it to be towed to the offshore anchorage site. Once there, tensioned steel cables or tendons are connected and the temporary floats are disconnected for reuse on the next TLP platform to be installed. Now let's discuss some advantages of floating windmill turbines. As we all know, floating windmills has potentially low environmental impact. The ease of manufacturing and installation, as the floating turbines and platforms can be built and assembled on land and then towed to the onshore installation site. Strong winds are blowing in deeper areas which improves its energy efficiency. Windmill power is one of the cheapest methods to reduce the emission of carbon dioxide from the production of electricity. Windmills have no form of emissions of gases and other harmful substances. Now let's discuss some of the disadvantages of floating windmill turbines. Offshore wind farms are expensive. Building foundations on the base of ocean is very hard. The energy in large waves is enormous, and the salt water is one of the most hostile environments for machineries that exist. Transmission losses due to the distances from where the power is needed is extremely large. Now it's time for us to conclude our topic. As we all know, the world is moving towards green and clean sources of energy to reduce the emission of harmful greenhouse gases and pollution created by burning of fossil fuels. This has led to a phase of outstanding developments in the field of renewable energy. One of the relatively new sources of renewable energy is the offshore or floating wind turbines. Floating wind turbines can access the powerful, steady offshore winds and is a great resource of clean power. The improvement in technology, Mass production and the use of economical materials in building turbines can cut down the cost of this technology to a great extent. Thank you.